is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, the 15th of November. Good morning, I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, we've got some light rain, 2 degrees, some clouds, and 1 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. We've got our COVID-19 case rates for today, 552 cases. That's after several days of hovering in the 600s. Of those, 37 new cases were found in Ottawa, 3 in Renfrew, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, 5 in Eastern Ontario. This all 3 deaths across the province. That's from 21,000. Nearly 500 tests done and a positivity rate of 2.2%. And as the province continues to see higher COVID-19 case counts, we're learning the youngest Ontarians eligible for the vaccine have the lowest rate. Our City News reporter Alex Bloomfield joins us with the latest.
Infectious disease specialist Colin Furness says vaccinations have also changed the way the virus is spreading.
What we're not seeing is uncontrolled, scary growth in large city centers. That's not happening. What we're seeing are local explosions, and they're distributed in various different places in the province.
The majority of cases have been occurring amongst young people for some time now, the least vaccinated age group, and data provided to the Star reveals the youngest eligible birth year, those born in 2009, that has the lowest vaccination rate, 68%. Compare that to the 2008 birth year, a 79% rate. That has some worried the looming rollout of vaccines to 5 to 11-year-olds may not be as effective as hoped. Alex Bloomfield, City News.
City News time is 10:02. Let's take a look at your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Just mainly cloudy for the most part. Chance of some more showers or flurries, though. The high 4 degrees. A gusty wind today out of the west-northwest. Tonight, mainly clear, down to -2. And tomorrow, sun and clouds, still cool, breezy, the high near 3. For today, the high near 4.
City News time is 10:03. The homicide unit of the Ottawa Police investigating after an incident last night in Barrhaven. One person in custody after a 64-year-old woman was killed and a 66-year-old man suffered serious injuries. This happened at a home on Sherway Drive around 9:30 in the evening. The search for a suspect led to numerous evacuations of nearby homes and an arrest around 1:45 this morning. The man expected to appear in court today. As deadline day is here for City of Ottawa staff, federal public servants, and long-term care workers, a new report shows that most Canadians think people should be fired from certain jobs if they aren't vaccinated. City News reporter Joey Keeney explains.
Airline employees, school teachers, first responders, medical professionals, restaurant and construction workers, and people who work for small businesses should lose their job if they refuse to get vaccinated. That's according to the latest survey from the Angus Reid Institute. The data comes as greater focus is placed on unvaccinated people across the country, with many experts saying future COVID waves will devastate rural communities where uptake is low. 7 in 10 people support onboard airline employees, teachers, first responders, and medical professionals being axed if they refuse to be vaccinated. That drops to about half of Canadians when asked about firing small business workers and people in the construction industry. Joey Keeney, City News.
And in the UK, the terror threat level being raised to severe, meaning an attack highly likely after a bomb exploded outside of a women's hospital in Liverpool. The blast happened yesterday morning. 4 men have been arrested on terrorism charges. ABC News foreign correspondent James Longman with more.
The police confirmed that a passenger in that taxi had brought a homemade bomb with them to the hospital. Somehow, the driver realised what was going on. He managed to escape. The mayor of Liverpool actually said that he'd locked the car in order to contain the explosion. She heralded him a hero. He was also hailed a hero by Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister.
So far, no motive from investigators. I'm Chris Curries. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
On the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
I'm going to keep track of your answers this morning to this question. Do nurses in Ontario deserve more than a 1% raise in pay? How would you answer that question? Do nurses in Ontario deserve more than a 1% raise in pay? Would you like the Ford government to be more generous to Ontario's nurses, to Loosen the purse strings a little bit for our nurses, for our frontline healthcare heroes. Offer up a little bit more money. By way of a pay raise for Ontario's nurses, 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310 to listen to some of the unions, for example, for Ontario's nurses, the big one being the ONA. I mean, Doug Ford's the Grinch. He is the Grinch. And he is stealing right from the mouths of Ontario's nurses this Christmas. And they are going to try and chase him out of office if he does not repeal Bill 124, which caps salary increases for nurses at 1%. They're running ads on City News right now, aren't they, David? Give us a sample there.
A critical nursing shortage is having a devastating effect on nurses' mental health and well-being. Nurses are dealing with impossible workloads and excessive overtime with no end in sight. They've had enough. They're quitting their jobs and many are leaving the profession. Without nurses, healthcare will fail. Find out what you can do at keepnursingstrong.ca.
Healthcare will
A message from the Ontario Nurses Association.
fail. Okay, that's the Ontario Nurses Association. Okay, do nurses in Ontario deserve more than a 1% raise in pay? How would you answer that question? Is it Rihanna? Rihanna?
Hello. Hi.
Yeah. Hi, Rihanna. You're on City News. Do nurses in Ontario deserve more than a 1% raise?
They absolutely do.
Okay.
And the crisis started long before COVID. You can take COVID aside, and Doug Ford knew that from when he took office. The nurses need a wage increase. And if you were to compare the job sectors out there to a more male-dominated job, would be police services or fire services, they're getting their raises and they're well above 1%. And Doug Ford knows that, but still yet a female-dominated workforce is now being attacked with a 1%.
Okay. Are you a nurse, Rihanna? Are you a nurse?
I'm not a nurse. I work in healthcare, but I'm not a nurse.
You work in healthcare, but you're not a nurse. Okay.
Yeah.
What's your impression of how things are going with the nurses right now? If you work alongside nurses, I'm guessing.
I do work alongside them, yes. The nurses, like I said, have been overworked and underpaid for many years prior to COVID. Now that COVID's here, I think the whole world, the whole province is really seeing it, and we're all feeling it because the hospitals are overrun, the nursing homes are overrun, and we don't have the ability to care for the people that need care when nurses don't have the energy to even give to their families, let alone their patients.
All right. Thank you for the call. Greatly appreciate it. Okay, that's got us going here this morning on this question. Do nurses in Ontario deserve more than a 1% raise? Okay, their raises, annual raises are capped at 1%, brought in 2019, 1% a year for 3 years. So 3% over 3 years. Do they deserve more than that? They say they do. What do you say? Richard in Orleans. Good morning, Richard.
Yeah, first-time caller, Rob.
Appreciate it.
I think the nurses deserve more than 1%.
Okay.
But I also believe that the province financially is not in any condition to give them more than 1%.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Now, nursing is a well-paid job.
It is. They do make good money. Yes, they do.
They make good money. I mean, you're looking at $65,000 a year plus. So, like I say, I just don't think the province is in a position to be able to give them more, because once they give them more, then it's going to start piling up. Everybody, all the civil service, they're going to want 3-4%, and it's not easy. But if nurses think it's difficult for them, and I appreciate nurses, they've done a tremendous job, and I have a great deal of respect for them.
Okay.
But if they think it's hard getting by on what they're making, try getting by on a 35-year civil service pension with your old age pension and your Canada pension. Try getting by on that alone, because you can't.
Okay, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, for sure. 750-1310, 750-1310, 750-1310. There's a piece of legislation in Ontario. It was passed by the Ford government in 2019, an austerity measure, okay? Long before anyone had ever even heard of COVID. Okay, and the worry wasn't COVID. The worry was Ontario's finances. So the government passed Bill 124. It's a wage gap bill. And it caps salary increases in the broader public service 1% a year, including nurses. Not just nurses. All sorts of professions, but nurses, the most vocal right now. Brought in as a cost-saving measure during a different time. After 15 years of Liberal government, big deficits, lots of expensive peace deals with public sector unions, and the Ford government passed this bill capping wage increases 1% a year for 3 years. 3% over 3 years. And now the nurses are saying, you have to do better than this, Premier Ford. And if you don't, we're going to do everything we can to defeat you, Premier Ford. Do nurses deserve more than a 1% raise? Ron in Ottawa. Ron, you're on City News. What do you say?
Hey, Rob, good morning.
Hi.
Firefighters, police officers, and nurses, I just don't think we can pay them enough,
Can't pay them enough. Okay, all right.
And, respectfully to other public servants, there's a huge difference between a critical care nurse and somebody, renewing my driver's license or something like that over a counter.
Okay.
So, we need to find the cash to pay them. I actually have friends that have moved to the United States to be traveling nurses. They've already left. So.
Oh, they have. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, there's good money in that.
Very good.
Yeah. One of the stories I read this morning, $10,000 a week.
Oof.
A nurse can make $10,000 a week. That's $500,000 a year.
And we're capped them at 1%.
Right.
So,
okay. Right. Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Okay, Ron. Thank you. Yeah, $10,000 a week. $100,000 for a 13-week gig to be a traveling nurse for the United States. And here in Ontario, pay raises capped at 1%. Paul in Ottawa. Paul.
Yes, good morning.
Should we give the nurses more than a 1% raise? That's what it comes down to. Paul, what do you think?
I really believe everybody should at least maintain what they have. So it should be inflation rate. Nothing is worse is working and going backwards.
Okay, the inflation rate right now, there's a new one coming out on Wednesday. The inflation rate now is 4.4%.
See, I'm retired, and my retirement fund said that for next year I'm getting 2.4%, which it's better than what we had last year at 1%.
Right.
So at least we're not going too backwards. But I would also highly recommend that they're saying they're overworked, but they're the one that has pushed for longer hours so they work less days. The nurses should be like everybody else. They should work 8 hours a day.
Okay.
If it's a demanding job, how the hell can you work 10 or 12 hours a day? I don't get it.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Okay. Cost of living increase. 4.4%. 4.4%. Very expensive for the government. Gloria in Canada. Gloria?
Hello, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, Gloria. Thank you for calling. Do the nurses deserve more than 1%?
Well, Paul just stole my thunder.
Okay.
If they want to get a raise, then I would like to see that they are working shorter hours per day.
Okay.
And like the rest of us, and spread it out over longer term. If you've ever been on a long flight, you know how exhausted you are when you get off. And their hours may change and their rotation. So I've seen some very bad-tempered behavior from nurses.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, before COVID, I may add. So I used to have a great deal of respect for nurses, and for some I really still do. But they need to change those hours so that they are alert and they have time to deal with their own issues outside of work.
Okay, Gloria, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're rip-roaring right along here on the Talkback Hour on a hot topic. Right now, pay raises for nurses are capped at 1% a year. Do the nurses deserve more than 1% a year? On the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise, and people. And for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was like thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen. We joke about it before. Things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive? That's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy because we have to shut down completely, you know? And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say t-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit. But when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really want to shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You want to be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, whether 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at certain times, so I'm glad to do that.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Do nurses deserve more than a 1% raise in Ontario? Under Bill 124, annual salary increases for Ontario nurses are capped at 1%. It's an austerity measure that was brought in 2019, supposed to be in effect for 3 years. The nurses want it done away with yesterday. What is your opinion on this issue as we go back to the phones? Donna in Ottawa. Good morning, Donna.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm good, Donna. Thank you for calling. Do the nurses deserve more than 1%?
Absolutely.
Why do you say that?
There's good and bad in every profession. So, yes, you are going to get those nurses that, you know, probably took it just for the paycheck. But if you've ever been in the hospital for any lengthy period, they work harder than the doctors do, and look what the doctors make. They come in, they turn around, they look at you for maybe 5 seconds, and then tell the nurse what to do and then walk out the door. Those nurses work hard, and since COVID has come in, they're working twice as hard. Yes, maybe they should cut their hours back so they're only working 8 hours a day because they are mentally getting stressed out. But yes, they deserve, as far as what everybody else is making in the sectors, they're making good money. But
they are making good money. Some of them are on the sunshine list, making $100,000 a year.
And yes,
right? So,
nurses do make good money.
Yeah.
But they work for it.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely, Ford should get rid of that 1% cap.
Okay. Thank you, Donna. Thank you. Yep.
You're welcome.
750-1310, 750-1310. Been mentioning the ads that have been running from the Ontario Nurses Association. I guess they're getting value added this morning on the Rob Snow Show for their buy. because they are airing here on City News Ottawa. You just heard one during our most recent commercial break. Let's play another one.
COVID-19 has pushed our healthcare system over the edge. For patients, that means delayed surgeries, postponed tests, and undiagnosed illnesses. There's been a nursing shortage in Ontario for decades. Now, it's a crisis that can't be ignored. Overworked nurses are burning out and leaving the profession. Empty praise won't solve this crisis. Without nurses, healthcare will fail. Find out what you can do at keepnursingstrong.ca. A message from the Ontario Nurses Association.
Empty praise, meaning, yeah, you're my healthcare hero, but your salary increase is capped at 1%. Now, I mentioned this, the inflation rate, we're going to have a lot of coverage of this week. The inflation rate is coming out on Wednesday. And remember, it was an 18-year high the last time the inflation rate was released at 4.4%, which is a lot higher than 1%. So basically, like all kinds of workers across all kinds of industries and professions, in real income terms, our nurses will be taking a pay cut. And politicians would call them healthcare heroes. The health minister would call them healthcare heroes. The labor minister would call them healthcare heroes, and the finance minister and any politician you bump into. But their salary increases here in Ontario are capped at 1% a year when inflation may be quadruple that rate right now. So obviously, they're not happy. And they're going to chase Doug Ford right out of office if they have their way. Diane in Stittsville. What do you think, Diane?
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Yes, they should be getting probably 4%.
Wow.
And here's why.
Okay.
They have been university educated for many years. Do you know how many nurses go into Queen's first year and don't make it through their first year?
No, I have no idea.
Well, it's probably about 20 to 30% that don't make it, because my son's girlfriend was there. She made it through the years, but lots of them don't make it. It's a difficult course. So, yes, definitely they should be paid more.
Okay, thank you, Diane.
Bob.
Thank you
Bye.
for your call. Great to hear from you. 750-1310. 750-1310. 750-1310. Some lines available for the first time on this topic this morning. Mo in Canada. Mo, good morning.
Morning, Rob.
Yes.
Congratulations for your wedding.
Oh, thank you, Mo. Thank you.
Yes, I haven't had a chance to say that.
Oh, I appreciate that. It's very kind of you, sir.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Another thing, I do believe if they want to raise, they should get the 3-year 1%. And also, they should change their hours for, instead of 12 or 10 hours, what everyone else does.
Oh, really?
The 8 hour.
You think they're working too long? You're like
you're
like the third or fourth person, Mo, who has said this. You think the nurses are working too long during the day?
But they can, they can manage their own life. Let's say they worked a 4-day, 12-hour shift. They still have to deal with their families. They still have to deal with their marriage. They still have to deal the thing that COVID brought, the losing a family member or helping a family member.
Or just being surrounded in that COVID environment for a year and a half. What does that do to somebody, right? So,
exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the we always you chose to be into the media.
Sure, broadcaster, yeah.
Exactly. Like, I mean, you could have chose something else, but you chose that. And you know what? Sometimes you have to give to take something. If you want to have a family life, you know what? You can still work 8 hours. You can do a retirement home. But what I'm trying to say today is that it's a noble job. I have nothing against them. It's the best job that people can help.
Yeah.
Suffering people, which our own family cannot. Could you imagine how many of us want to shower or bathe our mom and dad? So I appreciate
takes a special
time, Rob.
takes a special person, Mo. It does take a special person to do it. Yeah, you have to be very committed. Thank you, Mo, and thank you for the kind words, sir. I really appreciate it. Okay.
Both of you, congratulations.
It's very kind of you. Thank you, Mo. Yeah. Barry, good morning. Barry, you're on City News. Barry?
Good morning, Rob.
Now, Barry, you're probably one of those tight-fisted conservatives that calls me all the time, right? A very fiscally conservative type voter, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do here? Doug Ford is, the nurses are saying Doug Ford's being the Grinch, basically. He's the Grinch.
Yeah, well, I think they deserve a lot more than 1% a year, Rob. When I was a Teamster in a Teamster truck driving job, the average contract was 2 to 3 years, and every time a contract came up for negotiation, the Teamsters Union was usually on average asking for about 3% more for that next contract. And I think
they probably wanted a cost of living increase, right?
And when I was in the hospital recently for 2 weeks talking to the nurses there and hearing how they were fed up and some of them leaving, they haven't had a raise in 10 years. And giving them 1% a year over 3 years is no better than what they were already getting. So that's just a slap in the face to me. That's a slap in the face to them as far as
You know what, Barry? You're good. You're going to love this. That's actually the headline in the Toronto Star this morning. It's a slap in the face.
Yeah, well, I think they've been without a raise for 10 years, Rob. I think you should take all his 1% and give them 10% now and make it maybe a little bit longer contract or something, but make them happy, because it's like previous caller said, the doctors would be lost without nurses. They do all kinds of things, cleaning up after you use a bedpan and all that kind of stuff, and washing you and all this stuff when you're bedridden in the hospital. And it is a special kind of person. It takes a special attitude, and some of them are like angels.
Yes. They make good money, though, Barry. They make good money.
Oh, I know they do, but they deserve it.
Okay, Barry. All right. Thank you, Barry. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Look, we're going to pick it up right after the news on this one. It's a red hot topic this morning. It's all about Bill 124 and pay raises for our hardworking nurses here in Ontario. I'd like to know where you stand on this one. It's the Rob Snow Show, Talk Back Hour on City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November the 15th. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, we've got some scattered light rain and 2 degrees. In Smiths Falls, some clouds and 1. Here's what's making news this hour. After several days of hovering in the 600s, we've dipped down to 552 COVID-19 cases in the latest provincial report. Of those, 37 cases are in Ottawa, 3 in Renfrew County, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 5 in Eastern Ontario. 3 more people have died across Ontario, this from over 21,000 tests. It's deadline day for vaccinations for a number of groups today, including City of Ottawa staff, federal public servants, and long-term care workers across Ontario. At last check, all groups had known vaccination rates above 90%. The homicide unit investigating after an incident in Barrhaven last night. One person is in custody. A 64-year-old woman was killed, and a 66-year-old man was seriously injured. The man arrested after homes were evacuated in the area of Sherway Drive. That happened last night. The suspect expected to be in court today. And manufacturing sales fell 3% in September to just under $59 billion, dragged down by a 35.6% drop in sales of motor vehicles. Stats Canada reports vehicle sales fell due to the pandemic-related shortage of semiconductors that has hurt auto production. In a separate report, wholesale sales rose 1% on the back of a 21% increase in sales in agricultural products. City News Time is 10:31. I'm Chris Curries for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
It's time to talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
Do Ontario nurses deserve more than a 1% raise in pay? Do Ontario nurses deserve more than a 1% raise in pay? Pay raises for nurses are capped at 1% a year for 3 years. This started back in 2019 with Bill 124. And the nurses have never been happy about it. They're very unhappy now. There's a major question about whether Bill 124 is even constitutional, but whether it's even constitutional to have this kind of legislation, because collective bargaining is protected under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms as part of freedom of association. And if you know, in this case, it's a PC government, but Dalton McGuinty got slapped down when he tried to pull the same kind of thing with teachers. He froze teacher pay, and it was ruled unconstitutional. Because if any government comes along and says your wages are frozen or your wages are capped, there's a very good charter case that can be made that the employer, in this case the government, is not bargaining in good faith. And I don't think the Ford government in court is going to have a leg to stand on, quite frankly. It's being challenged now, and the chances are good that the Ford government's going to lose on Bill 124 in court. And it's going to have to end this wage cap and probably pay the nurses some back pay in the end. That's what I think is going to happen. But we're not there yet, and one thing at a time. But look, here's the thing. Folks, come on. You have to wake up to reality here. Right now, Ontario is in a bidding war for nurses with every other Canadian province and every American state. Everyone wants to hire nurses. In Quebec, if you can speak French, it helps, of course. But in Quebec, big bonuses, right? $18,000 bonuses. And basically here we're telling Ontario nurses, you know, people, I'm sure the Premier would call our frontline healthcare heroes. We're telling them that in real income terms, you're going to take a pay cut because pay raises are capped at 1% and inflation is 4.4%. The new inflation reading comes out on Wednesday. So the fear is, and you're hearing it in the ads that the Ontario Nurses Association is running. Play the third one, David, if you can. Can you play the third ad for me, David, that they're running here on the radio station?
Nurses are the backbone of healthcare. But right now, the nursing profession is in crisis.
Crisis.
There's been a nursing shortage in Ontario for decades. Now, it's a crisis that can't be ignored. Overworked nurses are burning out, and many are quitting the profession. Thousands of nursing positions are sitting vacant because there's no one to fill them. Without nurses, healthcare will fail. Find out what you can do at keepnursingstrong.ca. A message from the Ontario Nurses Association.
So look, the worry is, and it's already happening from what I hear, okay? Nurses are going to leave Ontario. They're either going to leave the profession or they're going to leave the profession in Ontario, and they're going to go work somewhere else where they can get better working conditions and more money and some respect. They had a big rally yesterday and said if the government doesn't do something about this Bill 124, Doug Ford is not going to hear the end of it. I would say right now, politically, the biggest challenge to Doug Ford's reelection is not Stephen Del Duca or Andrea Horvath. It's nurses and Bill 124. Now, calling in right now, unsolicited, okay. Rachel. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning.
Part of the Ontario Nurses Association Ottawa Hospital Bargaining Unit. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
Your last name, if you don't mind me asking?
It's Muir.
Muir. Rachel Muir. Okay. What do nurses want?
We want respect, primarily. I know everybody focuses on financial gains these days, and yes, we would like a salary that reflects at least the cost of living increase. But our big thing is with this particular bill, it just shows that we are not respected in the eyes of the government. They have constantly devalued us. We spent 18 months being called heroes, and now all of a sudden we're not. And honestly, I have to say that for myself and my colleagues, we are not heroes. We are professionals. And we would ask that we are treated as such, the way many of our professional male colleagues are treated.
Okay. How would you describe your relationship with the government when you bring this up, Bill 124? What sort of reception is that met with?
We're ignored. We too had a rally here in Ottawa on Friday.
Right.
We asked to meet with the MPP, with Lisa MacLeod, and we gave her ample notice, and she was elsewhere.
Right.
So it's yes, we're ignored, we're sloughed off, we're placated, we're patronized. It is not the relation. It is not a working professional relationship that we have.
So you're with the Ontario Nurses Association Ottawa Hospital Bargaining Unit. Okay. So give me a sense of what it is like right now in the nursing profession at the Ottawa Hospital. What are the working conditions like for nurses right now at the Ottawa Hospital?
They're difficult. We are
How so?
We're constantly understaffed. It's sort of Christmas in July if you arrive on your unit and you have full staff that day, because it just does not happen.
Is this a new thing? Is this a new thing? Is it a COVID thing?
It was always the case. But what's happened with COVID, with the disrespect that we've been subjected to with Bill 124, is that has got significantly worse. And everybody says nursing is in crisis. Yes, we're in crisis, but actually we're beyond crisis now. I've used the phrase before, we are no longer at the bottom of the barrel. We are beneath the bottom of the barrel. Ontario is short 22,000 nurses.
Okay.
There are not even enough students in all years of nursing programs. So from first year, having just started, to fourth year, almost graduating, there are not enough students combined to fill the current minuses. And that's not taking into account retirements, all that sort of thing, which are a constant thing. So we are in a serious crisis with nursing and healthcare. And as you have mentioned yourself, nursing is the backbone of healthcare. Without nurses, you have no healthcare, because there's not a healthcare institution, big, small, acute, long-term, that cannot function without nurses.
Do you know how many nurses work for the Ottawa Hospital? Would you have that number offhand?
Yes, I have approximately 4,300 nurses.
4,300 nurses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. How many do you think you need?
How many do we need?
Yeah. If you have 4,300, do you need 5,000, 6,000, something like that?
How many do we need at the Ottawa Hospital?
Just say at the Ottawa Hospital, just spitballing
Currently, to
numbers.
fill the minuses we have, permanent and temporary, we need over 600 nurses.
You need over 600 nurses?
Yeah, and that's just today. That's not It's a moving target, and unfortunately, it's a moving target that's constantly moving upwards.
Okay, so I want you to comment on a few things that we're hearing about the profession. Okay, nurses are quitting. True, they're quitting.
Absolutely.
Like,
yes.
just I'm done with it.
They're done. Yes.
Nurses are moving.
Some of them are moving. Yes.
Okay.
A lot of them are leaving the profession. They're done.
They're leaving the profession. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
They were going to retire in 5 years. They're retiring now. They are new to the profession, and they can't keep up with the hours and the stress level, so they're leaving.
Okay.
They're in the middle of their profession. They're 15 years in. They're a valuable resource to everybody, and they're done. They're going somewhere else. One of my members mentioned a friend who's a 15-year nurse who, rather than continue working in nursing because of the stress and the hours, the lack of time off, quit to work in a retail store.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's how bad it is.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Significant pay cut there.
And yes,
for here,
a huge reduction in stress.
Sure. Here in the National Capital Region, I suspect a lot of nurses would speak both official languages. The bonuses being offered by the Legault government, have they been any kind of lure, say, for Ontario nurses to move to Quebec or go work on the Quebec side?
They might have, but their salary scale is lower than ours.
Okay.
And you have to keep in mind that this is not a lump sum, because the Ontario government is offering $10,000 to critically care trained nurses.
Okay.
And you get it it's given over a period of time. So you stay X number of months, you get this much.
Oh, I see.
You stay another. So it's not a big lump sum. Is it a lure for some people? Definitely. For others, it doesn't. You could pay them millions, and they're at a point where they do not wish to be nurses anymore.
Wow. Well, sad to hear. Okay. Look, thank you for coming on the program. Nice to hear from you. Rachel Muir calling in. We didn't call her. She called us. Ontario Nurses Association, Ottawa Hospital Bargaining Unit. Very good. Very good. Okay. Anne in Nepean. Good morning, Anne.
Good morning. I'm hearing some comments from some people, and it's just making me see red. As you know,
right.
I've been dealing with hospitals for 40 years. So one of the things people say is, the nurses are well paid.
They are well paid. Yeah.
Well, so are the teachers.
The teachers are. Yeah. Well, this Bill 124 applies to teachers too. So.
Yeah, but they don't work half as much as the nurses do. They don't work the same hours. They don't work in the same conditions.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, the nurses should be paid twice as much as the teachers.
Okay.
I have been watching.
Well, we can pick on the teachers some other day, but here we're talking about nurses. So, yeah.
No, but what I'm saying, I have watched them for 40 years. The conditions under they work, it is unbelievable what they do. And to saying that they should be working shorter hours, 8 hours at a time, they don't have enough nurses as it is. Where are they going to find the extra nurses to fill?
Well, I mean, the person we just had on said they're shy 600 just at the Ottawa Hospital. They need they could use 600 nurses at the Ottawa Hospital.
We need to look at our healthcare system.
Yeah.
Seriously. Now.
All right.
Right now, it's on ICU.
Well, right now, under Bill 124, a nurse gets a 1% raise. Do they deserve more than that?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. All right, Ann. Thank you. Yep. Okay. It's very interesting. I'm finding it very interesting, the calls this morning. Is it Vija? Via. Sorry about that.
That's
Good morning. Thank you for calling. Do nurses deserve more than a 1% raise?
I don't think so.
You don't
I'm
think
a
so?
retired nurse quite a while back, but I just have to comment. Nursing shortage has not just happened now. It's been predicted for quite a while because nurses were aging and they were going to be leaving. So we had that problem, and that problem should have been sort of looked at much earlier. Now, I realize they work very hard. There's no doubt about it, but the extra money is not going to lighten the load. And just as the union person was talking, you really need more staff. What the nurses should be asking for is more staffing, better conditions, not the money. The money does not compensate for the work. I mean, you could work 20 hours a day and make a lot of money. What is that going to give you? You're going to be dead on the tracks. So that is not the answer. So I think the 1% is fine, but there is a big solution to deal with the nursing shortage. So obviously the COVID has brought everything to light now, and extra work. And as far as the 12-hour shifts, the nurses wanted that. When I was working, they really wanted the 12-hour shifts so that they could have 4 days off. So they initiated that. So it's really not something that the hospital wanted you to do. So anyway, those are just a couple of comments.
Well, great comments. Thank you. All right, we'll be right back. Final quarter here. One line available. That's it. It's yours if you want it. It's 750-1310 and a hot topic, pay raises for nurses, this morning on the Talkback Hour on City News.
Part of the reason I got back into this is because I am creative, and I also wanted to kind of have a fun flair, 50s vibe. All of the boxes are kind of fun names, the colors are fun, the logo is fun, and it's not just the package that I want to bring joy to people's lives, it's also the feeling that they get when they receive it, to know that there's someone that thinks of them and they're missing them, and showing that they care when they can't be there. The smallest of the subscription boxes is the red box, the classical box. So you would get 5 to 7 items from the variety of categories. Those do change quarterly. However, with items that are more popular, we'll bring them back as people ask for them, or you could get them as an add-on option. And then those items will be included in the Jazzy box, the same items from the first, although they'll be in a larger size, more quantity, as well as a couple extra items. And then in the largest box, the Doo-Wop Deluxe, which is our most popular, that is a comprehensive offering of all of the other 2 boxes, plus additional. So for example, if you were to get a certain item in the smallest of the boxes, that item would still be offered in the large, but in a bigger size. So you're getting everything bigger, plus an extra few items. The first thing is I look for Canadian suppliers and manufacturers. That is something I'm very proud of. I make sure that the products are safe, that they fit into the packages that we offer, obviously. They have to be the proper size and weight. I have approximately 300 items that we have so far that we can order that basically help make people's lives easier. There's snacks, there's self-care items, there's entertainment, a little bit of everything. And basically I try it and test it, and if it's duly approved, then I include it in our packages. So some of the categories that we have is we offer treats, which is, of course, everyone likes treats, no matter how old you are. So we have things like nuts, chocolates, different types of snacks, maybe a handmade piece of jewelry. We also include pieces of jewelry as well, occasionally. We also have our Pamper Items. So your Pamper Items would include things like your bath soaks, your specialty lotions, things like that. 2 other categories we offer are leisure. Leisure would include things such as puzzles, adult coloring books, paint by numbers, crosswords, word find, Sudoku, if that's how you say it. And we also have items for self-care and health. So masks, sanitizers, sanitizing wipes, they're all natural, non-drying, made with natural ingredients. So they're very good for everyone, especially in this time that we're dealing with.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Pay raises for nurses, hot issue today. Do Ontario nurses deserve more than a 1% raise? Under Bill 124, that's all they get is a 1% raise. Okay, it was an austerity measure brought in by the Ford government in 2019. Didn't just apply to nurses. All across the broader public sector. in the government of Ontario. Nurses' unions are very powerful, very vocal, very political. It's not quite at the same level as teachers' unions in my experience, but it's really not far off. And the reason it can become so political when you pick fights with nurses, it's like teachers. Everyone knows a nurse. Okay, so it has, politically speaking, it has this huge multiplier effect in politics. When you anger our nurses and you get the nurses mad at you, it's not just the nurses who are mad at you. It's the spouse of the nurse and the children of the nurse and the parent of the nurse and the neighbor of the nurse. And easily, I don't know how many nurses there are in Ontario. Let's say it's 100,000 nurses. There are 100,000 nurses in Ontario. 100,000 nurses in Ontario, easily 500,000 votes. Bill 124, they want that gone, okay? Relegated to the dustbin of history because of the 1% raise. It's all they get under Doug Ford. Do they deserve more than that? 750-1310, 750-1310. Ian, Brockville. Ian.
Many years ago, Rob, I had to go and get a surgery done that I don't wish upon any grown man to have to go and get done. And there I was in the gown room getting fitted for my gown, and one of the ladies made mention to me that I'd get suited up and then go get an IV put in my arm. Don't like needles too much, Rob. And I sat there and contemplated how bad I needed to get this surgery done. A few minutes goes by, and the nurse walks into the change room and asks me if I'm decent. She asks if she can come back and sit with me. And she sits next to me, and she explains how many years she's been putting IVs into arms. She looked like she'd been doing it for quite a number of years. And she concluded and said, I promise you that if you're willing to trust me, I will not let you down. And she held my hand. I was over the age of 18, 20-some-odd-year-old grown man. And she held my hand into that room. Now, God, we move forward to the pandemic. I think we can all remember back to the husband setting up the camping trailer outside, and those heroes doing whatever they had to do, not really complaining, not really saying boo. Heck, they're not even voicing as much as I think they should be voicing right now. It's just short and sweet, so we can keep this going. Find a way, okay? Just find a way to take care of those people because they need to be taken care of. Thank you.
All right, Ian, thank you. Okay, let's go to Joanne in Orleans. Good morning, Joanne.
Morning.
Do nurses deserve more than 1%?
Beautiful call, and I think we all have similar nursing stories. I think that the problem with this situation is that it's so very complex. I do think it's a bit insulting that the nurses are being lumped in with clerks and managers who sit comfortably behind desks. I don't think police and paramedics, fires, nurses, or doctors should be lumped in with
this is
just what we perceive as the public service.
Joanne, I just want to interrupt, okay? Because I had to look it up, Bill 124. It doesn't apply to everyone, but this is who it applies to.
Okay.
Hospitals, Crown agencies, school boards, universities, colleges, long-term care homes, Orange Air Ambulance, Children's Aid Society, any board, corporation, office, or organizations that did not carry on activities for the purpose of gain or profit in 2018 that received at least $1 million in funding from the government of Ontario. If that is you're being capped at 1% a year for 3 years.
Well, some of that is white collar.
Yep.
I consider
sure.
The ones that I was mentioning, I didn't catch so police aren't in that, paramedics aren't in that. Geez, if anyone deserves a raise, it's probably social workers. But I can see how they feel insulted by this. The constant, how many times in your short conversation did she say we don't feel respected? Well, that's not really true. However, being lumped in with white collar is not fair. However, I was hospitalized for a week last spring. I received excellent care from the nurses. And 2 of those nurses had part-time jobs or worked overtime. And the third, who wasn't directly related, but with my bedmate, my roommate, also disclosed that she was working part-time for a plastic surgeon. I think the shifts have bearing on the salary, on the time off. If they're going to negotiate more money, perhaps they need to negotiate also shorter shifts. They wanted this. It is not beneficial maybe to their lifestyle, or some think it is because of the 4 days off. And 4 days off mean you can also work part-time. I will also say that maybe the priorities, these bargaining goals that have been successful in the last couple of decades, aren't appealing to younger people. The fact that no one is pouring in with the brains and the compassion that are needed to be a registered nurse, maybe it's because the unions or associations have created an environment, a work environment, that the young don't like. They would rather have shorter days and, yes, work more often, but have a life. Okay. So, I think there might be blame all around. I would love to hear hospital admin and how they what is their take on this? I think it's far more complicated than just this banal line that we're not being respected. There's got to be more to it.
Okay. Thanks, Joanne. Thank you.
Bye.
Yep. Bye. Chris in Canada. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Rob. My mom was a nurse for 30 years, and one thing that hasn't been brought up, I agree they need more money. I just don't know where they're going to find it. In 30 years of nursing, on average, a nurse faces more violence potential than a police officer on an average day. And it's rarely brought up. The biting,
the abuse,
touching, the spitting, and often it's Alzheimer's patients who can't control the impulses or the responses, but you never hear about that part. And where did Doug Ford say he was going to go page by page to the province's expenses and cut a nickel off every dollar? Well, what happened to that, and where's the money that can go to that?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Okay, yep, and I think this is going to be the last one. Erica in Hammond. Good morning, Erica.
Oh, good morning, Rob. Hi, I was a registered nurse years and years ago. I graduated in 1987. So it was a different time then. We were hired straight out of nursing school into full-time positions at the Ottawa Civic. The entire graduating class was working full-time before the end of May, before we had even written our provincial exams. That's how desperate they were for nurses back then. But back then was the end of the era of when they respected nurses in the workforce. Nurses then had to start paying for their parking. They started decentralizing hospitals, closing down the cafeterias, closing down the sterilization units in the hospitals to clean and sterilize equipment. Laundry services got shipped out, so all these expenses kept going up, and they started cutting nurses back, eliminating beds, removing full-time positions. So nurses started to just feel like, a hamster in a wheel, working day in and day out on a 12-hour shift is really hard mentally and physically on a person's body. And so, nurses drop out of nursing. It's very rare to see a nurse working in active nursing now that's in her 50s. It doesn't really exist.
Okay. All right, Erica. Thank you for all your calls. Very busy hour this morning on that topic. We'll be back doing the Talkback Hour again tomorrow between 10 and 11 o'clock. Coming up right after the news, what did we get for 2 weeks of COP26? We'll ask Jeffrey Johnston from the Kingston Whig Standard. This is City News.
CIWW 1310 AM in Ottawa.
And CJET 1011 FM in Smiths Falls and the Valley. Number 1 for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 1011 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Monday, November the 15th. Good morning. I'm Chris Curries. Right now in Ottawa, it's 2 degrees, mostly cloudy skies. It's only 1 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Ontario reporting fewer than 600 new COVID-19 cases today after a weekend of higher counts. There are 37 cases in Ottawa, 3 in Renfrew, 4 in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, and 5 in Eastern Ontario. That according to provincial reporting. Our Alex Bloomfield joins us with a breakdown.
552 new cases being reported today, so down from the last few days, but still enough to raise the 7-day rolling average for a 15th straight day. We usually see lower numbers, absolute numbers on Monday, and higher test positivity. That is not the case here with test positivity, actually. Test positivity is at 2.2% today. Over 20,000 tests were conducted in the most recent period, so that's actually fairly similar to what we've seen all last week. There were 3 new deaths reported as well today due to COVID-19 in some way. Hospitalizations ticking up a little bit in the ICU, 141 COVID-related patients now reported. That's up about 10 from the levels we saw for most of last week. Alex Bloomfield, City News.
City News time is 11:02. Let's take a look at your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Just mainly cloudy for the most part. Chance of some more showers or flurries, though. The high 4 degrees. A gusty wind today out of the west-northwest. Tonight, mainly clear, down to -2. And tomorrow, sun and clouds, still cool, breezy, the high near 3. For today, the high near 4.
The City News time is 11:02. The homicide unit investigating after an incident last night in Barrhaven. One person in custody after a 64-year-old woman was killed and a 66-year-old man suffered serious injuries. This happened at a home on Sherway Drive around 9:30 p.m. The search for a suspect led to numerous evacuations at nearby homes and an arrest around 1:45 this morning. The man expected to appear in court today. Now, also at the courthouse, police investigating incidents of graffiti. Looked like Nazi symbols were spray painted on the side of the building and as well on the main sign. Police say that they are investigating. More news to come and reaction later on today. The federal and Alberta governments are set to announce a deal today to bring $10 a day childcare to the province. That leaves only a few provinces, including Ontario, that still haven't signed on.
Even though he criticized the federal childcare plan back in the spring, Alberta Premier Jason Kenney is set to sign on today at a news conference with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Edmonton, ensuring his province gets its share of the funding. The Trudeau government has set aside $30 billion over 5 years to help provinces and territories reduce childcare costs to just $10 a day. The announcement of this deal shines a light on the few remaining jurisdictions that haven't signed up, including Ontario. The Ford government has been negotiating with the feds and wants a larger share than the population rate due to all-day kindergarten. The federal plan has been widely celebrated by childcare and family advocates. New Brunswick, Nunavut, and the Northwest Territories are the others who haven't signed on yet. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
And it's deadline day for COVID-19 vaccinations for long-term care workers, federal public servants, and City of Ottawa staff. And it comes as our Joey Keeney tells us a new survey suggests you're not going to get a lot of support if you work in certain sectors and decide not to be vaccinated for COVID-19.
Some experts have long called COVID-19 the pandemic of the unvaccinated, and it seems as though Canadians have taken that personally. New data from the Angus Reid Institute shows the majority of people are okay with the firing of airline employees, school teachers, first responders, medical professionals, and restaurant workers if they don't have their shots. Now, this all comes as the spotlight is placed on communities with low vaccine uptake. 70% of people across the country think people in those fields should lose their jobs. That's down to about half of Canadians that think construction workers and small business employees should be out of work for not being dosed. Joey Keeney, City News.
And I'm Chris Curries. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Firm.
Fair.
Fun.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 1011 FM
and 1310 AM.
2 weeks of COP26 has come to an end with the Glasgow Climate Pact. So let's talk about it. Jeffrey Johnston is back. He's here every Monday from the Kingston Whig Standard. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
So 2 weeks. I didn't even get a T-shirt from Glasgow. So what is the result at the end of all of this? What happened at COP26?
Well, the overall result, I would say, is inconclusive, disappointing.
Blah, 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 Jeffrey? Blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, there was a bit of blah, 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 to quote Greta Thunberg. There were some important things. They did come up with that a side agreement on controlling methane emissions, and as we know, methane is probably the worst of all the greenhouse gases, and there's this pact signed on to by a large number of countries to cut methane emissions by 30%, which is really significant if they can hold forth on that. Another important development was the unexpected agreement between the United States and China to work together on climate change, because it looked like the last time we spoke that the Chinese weren't going to do anything. The Chinese leader, Xi Jinping, didn't attend, but then all of a sudden they announced that the Americans and the Chinese were going to work together on climate change, which is important. However, it's really important to note that it is very disappointing that they did not come out with the conference did not come out with an agreement to phase out coal. At the last minute, India, which burns a lot of coal, objected to the language and said that we want a phase down, not a phase
down. We're going to phase down coal, not phase out coal. And India, at this conference, I'd like to know what you think. It's been kind of obtuse. There have been calls to have net zero by 2050 as this target. India says, no, we're not going to do it by 2050. We're going to do it by 2070. Whether anyone achieves net zero by 2050 is in doubt, but so whatever, it's going to be 2070 if you're India. And then, to phase out was the goal for coal, right, at COP26, but instead, because of India's lobbying, it's phased down instead. Now, for India, coal-fired power plants generate 70% of India's electricity. So there you go. That's why. Right? That's why.
And it's not sustainable. Last night, it was announced that the schools in New Delhi would be closed again this week. The schools there have been closed for 4 weeks because of poor air quality. So, coal is not a sustainable way to generate electricity. And India right now is paying the price. Who knows how many people down the road are going to die of lung cancer, heart disease, and, other related illnesses because of that. Coal is not sustainable in terms of the climate crisis. And India was a big problem at COP26. And going forward, we're going to have to work with our friends in India to try to figure out how we can help them shift from coal to more sustainable forms of electricity generation, because this is just not sustainable. But then you add on top of all that, so one of the big alternatives to coal would be nuclear. And we do know that Canada, back in the days of Pierre Trudeau, when he was the prime minister, did help India with their civilian nuclear program, and they misused that technology at the time, to develop a nuclear weapon. So that is going to be a very touchy issue for Canada down the road as well. Overall, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was the summit host, tried to put a good face on COP and said that, the goal of keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius of pre-industrial levels, that goal was still alive. But the president of the COP26 conference, Mr. Sharma, who was a Brit, was very emotional when they announced that they were making this compromise on coal, and he actually shed a few tears, and he actually apologized to a lot of the delegates who were there, because many of the island nations were really upset that they made that compromise, because they're facing existential threats, and that's not hyperbole. It's true that the sea levels are rising, and And in the next century, some of these island nations could literally disappear, submerged by rising sea levels caused by the melting of the polar caps due to climate change. So there is a lot of discord. The only bright spot is that by the end of next year, all the countries who are a party to the COP agreement have to submit new statements about what they're going to do. But John Kerry, the U.S. climate envoy, said that that particular paragraph may not apply to the United States. So we'll see whether in the next year or so there'll be made improvements will be made, or if it'll just be status quo and we'll just become, we'll just hurtle towards, more than 2-degree warming of the planet. So we'll see what happens.
Okay. What did Canada commit to for COP26? I mean, the one that got all the headlines, I guess, would be the cap on oil and gas emissions.
Yeah, we're going to supposedly slash. We committed to slashing. I'll put it that way. We have committed to slashing our emissions by 40 to 45%, which is significant. So that would mean slashing emissions in the oil and gas sector, which is causing some consternation back in Canada, especially in Alberta.
Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland.
Yeah,
sure.
Many people are saying that it unfairly targets the oil and gas industry. Canada will have to also take real steps to cap methane emissions. Now, when it comes to methane, a lot of the emissions that come from methane, it comes from sloppiness on the part of companies. And it turns out that Russia is the biggest emitter of methane in the world because, when they're extracting their natural resources, they don't take care to control the methane emissions. So this is something Canada's going to have to do, and we're going to actually have to push.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I'm sorry, Jeffrey. It's going to be interesting to see if Canada actually does it. This government that we have, it talks a lot about its ambitious climate agenda, and it has since it was the third party running against Stephen Harper's government. Then it kept Stephen Harper's targets for greenhouse gas emissions reductions, the 30% target, and never met them. It's been in government for 6 years. Greenhouse gas emissions each and every year have never gone down. Okay, they have only gone up, along with carbon taxes. And the carbon tax is going to go up all the way to $170 a ton. So now the pledge from the Trudeau government is somehow, even though it has never managed to cut emissions at all in 6 years, somehow it is going to manage to cut them by 40 to 45% in the next 8. I'd like to see how.
Yeah, so I agree,
right?
And it's a huge hill to climb, as I've said before on the program.
Yeah, sure.
If Canada is going to do this, we're going to need something like what the Biden administration has proposed, a Build Back Better plan. And so what that means is we're going to have to make massive investments in a sustainable infrastructure. So that means that we're going to have to electrify our economy. So that means we're going to have charging stations for electric vehicles all across this country. So, all those gas stations you see now, we're going to have that many charging stations.
Sure, and then you're going to have the grid infrastructure to be able to handle that, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
but it's interesting, and then they talk about the retrofitted buildings and the retrofitted homes, but then, for example, Peter Fraser is coming up, our financial planner who's with us every Monday, and we had him do a deep dive on, what are the incentives available to Canadians if they want to take part in this, Build Back Better plan. You know what the grand total is? It's about $5,400 worth of tax credits. $5,400, so you can buy some energy-efficient windows or an energy-efficient appliance, or swap out your water heater for something like that. It's kind of the previous Trudeau, when he was running in the election against Andrew Scheer, was talking about $40,000 interest-free loans. There's not anything like that on offer from the government right now in order to try and achieve any of these greenhouse gas targets?
Yeah, I mean, $5,400.
$5,400. You know, you and I both, and part of that will be used to pay for the person who has to come and audit your house.
Yeah, I mean, we recently, a few years back, spent about $10,000 upgrading our windows. So it's not cheap, and this is why Canada needs something like Build Back Better, and it doesn't have it. And as you say, we've got to upgrade our grid. I mean, it means rejigging the entire economy. So it's all well and fine to make the pledges. We should be making the pledges, but we have to have the plan to back it. But with that said, when whatever government it is comes out with a Build Back Better plan, then we can't do what, a lot of American politicians are doing and then start complaining about adding to the deficit, because, Rob, this is going to be an expensive thing that we have to do. But it's going to be even more expensive if we don't do it, because there are terrible economic consequences to not addressing the climate crisis.
All right. We'll stop here. We're going to pick it up. You're going to stick with us a little bit longer this week,
yes,
Jeffrey, if you don't mind. Yeah. Because outside of COP, I do want to talk about some other things. It's heating up along the Ukraine border, Russia-Ukraine, an issue that we've been following with great interest for years, you and me. So we'll talk about that next with Jeffrey Johnston, International Affairs columnist, Kingston Whig Standard, 1117. Rob Snow Show here on City News.
To opening a business especially in a pandemic, in that kind of situation, is very challenging. First, people don't know me. People don't know my product. To build a new clientele, to build a trust for them, to show them that I care about it. I do love my food. That was the biggest challenge. And of course, in all lockdown, where I had to face it regards my employee, girls, ladies, what they work for me. I didn't want to tell them, sorry, I'm closed, I'm not having a job for you. No, they have families, they have kids to feed. So this is very important because we are family orientated. And we decided to open. We, of course, essential business. So been very tough, very, very tough, as we didn't see people on the road. Market was completely quiet, but we knew it that we have to wait, and we knew it that we're gonna be fine. In this town, we built online shop, Vedel Online, and we did Uber Eats, which one is picking up and is very, very popular. We have a really good feedback. So this is the song from my heart. And and we try to expand. I'm thinking about opening another location. So I want to make Vedel famous. I want to make the Vedel place to be for all the families with kids. Try the traditional food, what their grandparents cooked in the countries when they're from, or even Canadian people. They're more than welcome to come and try our famous pierogis. I try to be passionate about my food, organic food made with love, with all homemade, organic. So you can find food from all over the Europe: Polish, German, Ukrainian, Romanian, French, Armenian, so all kind of different types of food. Homemade lunches, we focus on the homemade lunches, grandma style. I keep always saying, like in my Genia Babcia house, how she cooked, I wanted this love and this food over here, because I believe that will bring all people around me. And all the organic cold cuts, lovely selection of sausages, cheeses, European cheeses, great selections of mustards, French cookies. All what you need from Europe you can find here at the Vedel Touch of Europe. If you think good way, that's it. You have to. I had the option to cry in the corner and say, oh, pandemic is coming. No, you need to stand up and fight for it and have your eyes open, think outside of the box, and do it.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News,
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Hey, we're back with Jeffrey Johnston from the Kingston Whig Standard. international affairs columnist. My gosh, it's a busy beat these days, international affairs. With COP26 later this week, Three Amigos, first time in 5 years for a Three Amigos summit. Never had one during the Trump administration, right? So there's that. Biden and Xi tonight, virtual summit. There will be a lot going on there. And in the meantime, there's Russia-Ukraine. So there's a lot happening in the world. It's a very complicated world. But I take particular interest in this Russia-Ukraine thing because, Russia has this track record. It just went in and annexed Crimea, of course. In 2014, the world really did nothing about it. Just kind of like China with Hong Kong, just kind of sat idly by and did nothing about it. So when the president of Ukraine says there are 100,000 troops amassing along the Ukrainian border, we should pay attention to that. Plus, the Canadian forces are there training Ukrainian forces as part of a training mission. What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, of the three issues you just listed, I am most concerned about Russia. Absolutely. So the long and the short of it is we just don't know. Is this a bluff by Vladimir Putin? Because they're having all kinds of economic problems in Russia. Putin is deeply unpopular. And an old playbook of authoritarian leaders is to launch a foreign war to whip up patriotism and nationalism to distract from domestic problems. Is that what he's doing? Is he just going to ratchet up the pressure and then just pull back at the last minute? Or is he actually going to take the rest of Ukraine? Because Vladimir Putin is an old KGB man, and he once said that the breakup of the Soviet Union was the worst tragedy of the 20th century, and he would like nothing better than to restore Ukraine to Russia, restore the old Soviet Union, and he wouldn't stop there. Now, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, but you're right. Canada has a training mission.
It wants to be, though, right?
Yeah, it wants to be, yes, in Ukraine. Actually, earlier this year, President Zelensky, the Ukrainian leader, and Prime Minister Trudeau spoke on the phone. I believe it was back in April. And one of the issues Zelensky brought up is he wanted Canada to push within the NATO alliance to advance Ukraine's request to become part of NATO. There's this process, this roadmap, basically, that countries can apply to try to get into NATO. Now, NATO has been very careful about this because they realize that if NATO admitted Ukraine into the alliance, Putin would use this as a pretext to actually invade. And this is one of the talking points used by the Russians. They said that NATO is being very aggressive in the Black Sea, and that's why Russia is building up its military within the annexed Crimea Peninsula, which they took in 2014, and also along the border with Ukraine between Russia. And there's this part of Ukraine that East Donbass, and it's a disputed area. Russia is waging hybrid war there. There are pro-Moscow insurgents in East Donbass, and there is an ongoing war there. There is an actual shooting war. Ukrainian soldiers are being killed in shelling, and it is not actually a stalemate right now, even though that there is this peace agreement in place. It is escalating all the time. Right. And it looks very much like the Russians may actually invade. So this is something we've got to worry about because there are 200 Canadian troops in central and western Ukraine. They wouldn't be in the line of fire right away, but this is something we would have to consider if it actually happens.
Plus, it's a massive domestic story because we have a huge Ukrainian population in Canada. It's like 1.4 million people of Ukrainian heritage in this country, and
yes,
not to mention our deputy prime minister is one of them, right? So, okay, but you think it might be like a wag the dog thing? It could be a wag the dog thing for Putin.
I mean,
right?
I don't want to simplify it to just that because there is a lot of fervor within the Putin government to rebuilding the Soviet Empire. And as I said, they wouldn't just stop with Ukraine. So we also have troops in Latvia. Latvia is actually part of NATO, unlike Ukraine. So Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, they're all concerned about what's going on in Ukraine. Meanwhile, we've got this situation on the Polish-Belarus border.
Right.
Belarus is a close ally of the Putin regime. And they have basically allowed a large number of migrants from the Middle East into Belarus, and then they're deliberately funneling them to the Polish border. And the Poles have had to set up barbed wire and put soldiers across it. This is what NATO refers to as hybrid warfare. This is straight out of Putin's book. So he'll use migrants, he'll use stealth invasions, he'll also use separatists to destabilize allies of the West. And so what we're seeing in Belarus on the Polish border could actually be a distraction for what may come in Ukraine. So I am very concerned about this.
It's a very interesting part of the world to pay attention to now because Lukashenko is the strongman in Belarus. And he also said, because energy is a big geopolitical piece of the puzzle as well, right? And there are pipelines that go through Belarus. And he has basically told EU leaders, if you sanction our country, we're going to make sure you freeze this winter. So
yeah, there's a lot going on here. And a lot of it comes down to, and it all comes back to Putin. Now, Putin is fabulously wealthy. He has enriched himself. He's ingratiated himself with all the oligarchs. The same thing in Belarus. And so whenever the West sanctions any of these oligarchs, it gets a reaction from Putin. So earlier this year, we sanctioned several members of the Putin regime and also some of their entities and these oligarchs. And there was a lot of pressure on the oligarchs in Belarus who are closely allied with Putin. So Putin's defending the oligarchs. He's defending his own interests, and that makes him even more dangerous. So when Canada brought in these sanctions earlier this year, the Russian Foreign Ministry basically turned around and said that Canada won't recognize reality in Ukraine, that the Crimea Peninsula is now ours, and that Canada should just move along. And that's really disquieting because that means that they will just flout international rules and they don't care what anybody says. And I don't think this bodes well for Ukraine. Now, all this, I want people to understand, I'm not a war hawk. I'm not saying Canada should go to war in Ukraine because, as I say, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, so we do not have this obligation. Under NATO, the NATO Charter, an invasion or an attack on one is an attack on all. Ukraine is not part of that.
That's right.
So we're helping to train them, and our whole raison d'etre to be there is to help the Ukrainians defend themselves so we don't have to fight for them. Nevertheless, it might be the first domino to fall, because then we would have to seriously worry about Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, which are NATO allies.
Got to go. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Really good, Jeffrey. Thank you. From the Kingston Whig-Standard, Jeffrey Johnston. Scott Moffat, City Councillor Rito Goulburn, not running for re-election in next year's municipal election. He'll tell us why right after the news here on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning. This is Monday, the 15th of November. I'm Jason White. Right now in Ottawa, cloudy sky, 2 degrees. It's 2 in Smiths Falls. Here's what's making news this hour. This is deadline day for Ontario's long-term care home employees to have their first dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Staff who don't present proof of a first dose have to show a medical exemption in order to be able to enter the building for work today. Initially, this was supposed to have been the deadline for them to be fully vaccinated, but the province has pushed that back to mid-December. The homicide unit is investigating last night's killing in Barhaven. A 64-year-old woman was murdered, a 66-year-old man seriously injured at a home on Sherway Drive. One man was arrested at the scene after nearby houses were evacuated. Police are investigating graffiti spray painted on the walls of the Ottawa courthouse. Pictures on social media show Nazi symbols on the main sign of the Elgin Street courthouse. Ottawa police say they are investigating. The O train made it through the weekend. Trains are still running this hour, but R1 replacement bus service has now been scaled back. Now only running alongside the train during morning and afternoon peak commute times. City News time 11:32. I'm Jason White. For news anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Scott Moffat will not seek re-election. He is still the city councillor, though, for Rideau Goulburn ward. He joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah,
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? More importantly,
I'm doing great, thanks.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. Why now? Why now? Why will this be your last year as a city councillor?
Well, I think I was trying to say, and when I made my announcement there on Saturday morning, that this will be, my third term, and it will be 12 years at the end of this. And I think I always had in the back of my mind that 12 years was a good length of time to be on council, and I don't think my thoughts behind that have changed at all. And so I think, it made sense. It was interesting that I could go back and actually find when I had made those statements during the 2010 election before I'd even ever been elected about committing to sort of 12 years when asked about term limits. But no, I think it makes sense from what I've, been able to do on council and the positions I've been able to hold, that it makes sense at some point to move on. And, for me, I think that time being at the end of this term is logical.
Okay. There is a provincial election coming up. Do you have any interest in running in that provincial election?
Not really, no. I think if I wanted to run, let's look back, right? So in 2018, in the riding I live in, which is Carleton, my MPP, Lisa McLeod, chose to run in Nepean, leaving my seat open for someone to come in. If I wanted to do that, that would have been the time, in my mind, because now you have someone in place there that has now been elected and is now in that position. And for all intents and purposes, I believe that she'll seek re-election this upcoming spring. So, no, I don't see that being something that I'm interested in. I think also too one of the things I've enjoyed most about being on council is just the independent nature of our jobs. That we aren't tied to a line of thought or a political party where we have to be cognizant of the position that we take, or I get my speaking notes for the week as to what I'm allowed to say this week. I've always been quite outspoken about whatever I feel the need to be outspoken about, regardless of partisanship, and I think that's what I prefer, and I don't feel that the party system allows me to be myself.
Well, yeah, on that point, let me just jump right to that because it's on my list of things I want to ask you. Some would say there is a party there around City Council, and there's the Watson Party.
Some would say there's more than one party.
And you are part of the Watson Party or the Watson Club. How would you respond to that, Councillor Moff?
I'd say I'm a member of City Council, and we're all 24 of us are all duly elected to do our jobs. And I think that in my time on council, I've shown my ability to work with all members of council to achieve results for the people of this city. And it doesn't matter what the issue is. I don't always find myself in the majority. I sometimes find myself losing votes, whatever to one. And sometimes that happens. But for the most part, I've been able to work with members of council to get things that I felt were important done. I look at, climate change master plan was approved unanimously The official plan was approved 21 to 2. Big files, Energy Evolution also approved unanimously. These were things that I was heavily involved in, working on, major policy. That didn't come down to any sort of major vote split, but had all council together. And these are major documents.
Yep. Big documents, big plans. Plans, big important plans. Agree. Say on a local basis, out in the Richmond area and other parts of your ward, when you look around, when you drive around your ward, what are you proud of? Like when you look around, you say, well, that's something that I did as a city councillor. I helped shepherd that through the council process. What's something that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I think that would be along this. I think often, we have an unfortunate reality of seeing some of the negative more than some of the positive we've done. We often think it's easy to think about the things that you haven't done than the things that you did. Mm-hmm. I think the priorities that we've had out here from day one, investing in infrastructure, renewal, and those types of things. Those are things I think as a council since 2010 we've grown substantially. And I can point to, I think $7 million is going to be spent in Ward 21 alone in 2022 on road renewal. Those are things that matter for residents out here. But some other projects, you look at Watson's Mill and the surrounding area. That was something that was kind of in flux when I took office, and I feel like we've shored that Dickinson Square up in terms of properties within city ownership and then redevelopment and Remembrance Park that was built in that area. I think there's places you can look at, parks that we've helped build in places that never really had access because we prioritized that, not based on because there's, more people that live there than others, because there really wasn't, but their access to those types of amenities weren't really there. I felt that was important too. So I just think, making the proper investments in community, never necessarily prioritizing, one group over another, I think has always been important, and it should be important for anyone who does this job.
Okay, so you have a year.
Yeah.
What's important for you in this next year? What remains, say, undone for you?
Well, there's always going to be. This is the reality. This is something I had to come to grips with. I think when I first thought about what's next for me, I think I started having that thought to myself back in let's go as far back as 2016, trying to figure out exactly where you want to go and what you want to do with your life and how long should you be on council. And I think early on you had to come to grips with the fact that no matter when you leave, you will leave work undone. So for me, it's just a matter of doing the job as I've always done it, try to do as much as I can while I still have the opportunity to hold this office. Start implementing the official plan next term. We have the Transportation Master Plan coming up. Just had a meeting on that this morning. We have that discussion coming up in early 2022 about the priorities and some of the projects that will come of that. And there are some important projects in that I will never see happen, but at least on council, but we lay the groundwork for those. So, decisions I make today and in the next year will actually help the person that follows me to achieve objectives that are important to this ward. And it's important that I, do this job right until the end to make sure that we set ourselves up for that it's not about, me taking credit for the things I've done, but we as a whole and what we can do that's better for our community and make it better for the long run.
Right. There will always be work to do, you're saying. There will always be work to do. Yeah.
When the first day I took office, my inbox filled up. It was emails that maybe they felt Glenn couldn't do. Well, maybe I couldn't do them either, but there's always that belief that there's a new person in. Let's go see if we can get the thing done that we couldn't get done before. And maybe sometimes you can, sometimes you can't.
Okay. Yeah, there's been this series in the Ottawa Citizen all about Jim Watson and his 30 years in municipal politics. 30 years. How would you describe what it's like working with Jim Watson?
He's someone that I've always had an easier time working with him. I don't, personally, I don't think I have a hard time working with anyone, regardless of different relationships and whatnot. But I think, working with the mayor has been quite easy. I think he's the only mayor I've ever worked with. I think that's important to station. I didn't win in 2006, so I never worked with Larry O'Brien. But when we came in together, we came in sort of with that same mindset of sort of building a bit of a team first mentality when it came to how City Hall should operate and focus on getting things done. rather than picking fights at council. Now I realize that in recent years there's been more fights than necessary, and I prefer that not to happen. I think the way that I've done the job, we've tried to avoid that type of situation and find ways to reach common ground. And the mayor's always been generally pretty good at that. And I think from my perspective, anytime that I've needed something, anytime that we disagreed on something, he's always been open to work with me on trying to resolve those things. And often any disagreements that we have had have been private, because we've managed to come down to a position that we could both work together on and move forward on and get the results that we both wanted out of any situation. I look back as far back as my first term and dealing with the situation with the Rideau Carleton Raceway and what eventually became a Hard Rock Casino. That was something that we were originally on the opposite sides of, but didn't give up, kept on working on it, and we ended up coming to a point where a year later we brought forward a motion that led to what is now going to be the Hard Rock Casino at the Rideau Carleton Raceway. And I think that's an important thing for rural Ottawa and for economic development out here. And that's just one example of many that I could probably come up with where him and I have been able to work together on things that we felt were important. And maybe, like I said, you don't always agree on things, but there's always a way forward. There's always some way to work together and collaborate to achieve those goals.
So whoever wants your job as the city councillor for Rideau Goulburn Ward, what would be your advice to someone contemplating a run for city council? What are they getting themselves into? What should they know about the job?
Well, one thing I'll tell anyone running for office anywhere, don't run just because you need a job. This is not just a job. This is your life. This is what your life will be as long as you have it. There is no, mentally there's no time off. You're always thinking of the job. I can't drive around this ward without thinking of things that either need to be done or things I haven't done. I drive by houses every day where I look at that house and I think of an item with someone that lives in that house about something. It's constantly with you, right? So I think that's important, a mindset to have, that this will be very time consuming, but very it's rewarding too when you get things done, even if it's the smallest thing, even if you only help one person. It's very rewarding when you get that feeling. So it's important. So I don't want to scare anyone away with that. But also the research element and look into things and make sure you're reading the reports that come even before you get elected. Just going and sitting down and watching council. A lot of candidates, once they register, they go and they watch council. You don't need to sit and watch council. That's not the job. The job is what comes before you get to council, and the research and the time and the effort that goes into those reports that come before committee and council, and those conversations and working with the community and working with city staff. That's how we create things. That's how we move the city forward. It's not debates at council, and I think that's something that would be important. Make sure you're well read. Make sure you look into stuff. If you have a position on something, make sure you try to understand what the other position is too, and do some research into that side too. Almost convince yourself that you're right by challenging yourself on your position. I think those are important things. But that's it. That's what I learned. I ran in 2006, and I would say that I was a far better candidate in 2010 than I was in 2006. Because in 2006, I really didn't know what I was doing, and I think I learned. The reason why I say losing 2006 was the best thing for me politically is because I was able to learn from what I did wrong. I was able to see that people did believe in me, that wanted me to do the job, but that I wasn't good enough at the time, and I needed to understand, what did I do wrong? And I think the problem was I wasn't listening, and I was listening I was putting stuff forward that I necessarily didn't believe in myself. I needed to work on that. I needed to talk to people to get a sense of what they wanted me to be campaigning for, and then I could really sell what I wanted to do because I believed in it myself.
Well, 12 years of public life is a huge commitment, Scott Moffat, and you are to be credited for giving it your all. We didn't always agree on all the issues, and we won't over the next year, I suspect. But I thank you for your service to the city, and thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Rob. It's always been a pleasure, and I'll never hold it against you that you'd ever had me on before I was elected as one of your candidates for council in 2010 roundtable that you always had everyone else on except for me.
I don't know how I overlooked that.
You.
I know. And I didn't endorse you in that race either.
No, I think actually the day before.
Which you never failed to remind me. So
you and Mark Sutcliffe were on the day before the election. It was November 12th, it would have been October 24th, 2010. And you were on talking about Rita Goulburn, and you said, I don't think anyone's going to beat Glenn Brooks, but if someone could, it's probably Bruce Webster. And anyway, I remember that.
Oh, I know you do, Scott. I know you do.
You, though.
No, I know you do, and I know you don't. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Scott Moffat, City Councilor, Rita Goulburn Ward for the next year. And there will be one less Leaf fan on Ottawa City Council. Coming up, Money Mondays with Peter Fraser. This is City News.
My name is Pamela Caillou. I'm a local artist. I'm Métis, and the heritage derives from Algonquin and Huron background. That comes from way, way back from the 1600s. I was trained in school classically, like we studied the masters like Picasso, Michelangelo, Van Gogh, and so you'd have to say it's quite different, my style. What I've done is taken the skills that were taught to me by traditional painting and incorporated that with the Indigenous heritage. My art pieces incorporate the energy and spirit of the Mother Earth in pretty much every single one of them, because I want people to realize, even though we might think we are the masters of the domain here on the planet, that is not the case. It's the Mother Earth that's providing a balance and our causes to live and whatnot. And it's just to always see her and remember her and respect her. Well, I try to keep my style different because there are like a handful of Canadian artists that are really well known, like Norval Morrisseau and whatnot, but it's been done. So I kind of want to stay away from the pack, and that's what makes my artwork a little more unique. But at the same time, if you're looking at it, you do know it's Indigenous and you do know it's the woodland style. I usually start by coming up with an idea, which would be, let's say, 4 days. Well, it depends what's inspiring me at the time. It could be a lot of trees, it could be water, it could be the medicine wheel. I would choose a subject and try to really incorporate what it is I want people to see from that. So then from there, I have sketchbooks and I do little sketches of everything because the canvas is expensive. So you don't want to start something and have to throw it away. And then from there, I go on to the bigger piece on the canvas. Once I have on my sketches the direction I want to take my artwork in. I chose a lot of vibrant colors for the pieces because if somebody is willing to make the commitment to have my piece of work in their home, I would actually like them to come home after a long, hard day, and some days aren't so great, to look at something that's very joyful.
Opinions.
Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time for Money Monday with Peter Fraser, financial planner with Cardinal Planning and Manulife Securities Incorporated here in Ottawa. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome back, Peter.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you again. We're going to talk today about socially responsible investing. Now, I think back to 20 years ago and being a young business reporter here in Ottawa, first covering socially responsible investing. And at that time, it was kind of a new thing where it was, well, I'm not going to buy shares in, say, Philip Morris, the big tobacco company or something like that, or I'm not going to invest in Lockheed Martin because they're part of the military-industrial complex. But it's moved well beyond that now, and SRI, or socially responsible investing, has now become this kind of even bigger term, which is ESG, right? It's all governed by ESG. So help us understand SRI, socially responsible investing, and how it is tied into ESG.
Got it. Well, for many investors, the name of the game now is to do good and to feel good and to generate wealth for themselves all at the same time. And as you point out, we call this socially responsible investing, or SRI for short, and it has come of age. You're exactly right. It focuses on companies that make positive impacts while also producing strong, acceptable financial returns. And I was in the arena that time ago and recall thinking that, oh yeah, well, you're going to hold your nose and probably accept some average performance. But a lot of things have changed in the past couple of decades. And in practice, as you say, SRI is related to another investing acronym, and we call that one ESG. So that is the lens, the metric or filter that SRI investors use. And E stands for environmental sustainability. Mm-hmm. S stands for social sustainability, and the G is for corporate governance practices. So SRI investors kind of put their portfolio down on 4 pillars. And as you rightly pointed out at the beginning, the first one is that exclusion industry filter, which is basically guns, think tobacco, gambling, some nuclear, other things, predatory lending, and so on. So you look for things that you'll never, ever want your money in. The second leg of that stool, I guess we could say, is that SRI uses the ESG filter to evaluate companies, and they look at their environmental good resource efficiency, for instance, often translates into if you use things how a company reduces waste, they may make a positive environmental impact, which gives them a positive mark on that.
Does a big company have a plan to get to net zero on its own operations emissions by the year 2050 or something like that, right, Peter? Yeah.
And we'll see in a minute, like we can find report cards on how these companies are doing. So social outcomes, the S part, obviously companies that benefit from fair, progressive, treating employees right philosophies are stars or get positive reviews, as well as the companies that treat the communities that they do business in positively are favorably looked at. And on the governance side, marks are given for increasing board transparency, increasing board independence, also for things like executive compensation, where it aligns with performance, and companies that are very supportive of strong shareholder rights. So the third piece is really just a mantra. It is that SRI doesn't mean anymore that you're all about sacrificing returns. Their mantra is that it's responsible investing. It's not philanthropy. So there is a strong expectation of high returns while you're doing good in a way that SRI investors believe that everybody benefits. So we build companies that are sound and that protect the people and that protect the planet.
Yeah, sorry, Peter. A lot of companies have woken up to the fact that I'm not going to attract capital without a strong ESG scorecard, right?
Absolutely. I mean, MSCI, that's Morgan Stanley Capital International, has a very popular green index. You can go on there and get rankings all the way from leaders to laggards, and companies can get a AAA all the way down to CCC rating on these really critical issues. So it's not just a lighthearted approach anymore. It's, so ubiquitous that investors are learning how to avoid something called greenwashing, which, as you would suspect, where a lot of noise and activity is placed, there's unscrupulous green claiming too. So investors really always need to do their due diligence on issues and make sure that they're running their portfolios through what's important to them, because the moral of the story is that SRI is good for your portfolio. That's what the evidence is pointing to. Also, that companies that do well in ESG almost always perform now at least as well as their peers. And this is important too, I think, that they're growing evidence that they are at least as, and in some cases more resilient in market downturns. So
wow.
It's on
for
the
example,
rise.
some of the returns that Peter's provided this morning, Microsoft, which is also AAA credit, 26% return, 10 years, right? 10-year return, right?
Yeah.
And NVIDIA, the big semiconductor company, computer chip company, 10-year forward rate of return, 20.7%, plus a AAA ESG rating. So...
Yeah, I like both those companies for different reasons. I mean, Microsoft, ubiquitous, obviously, but, really what that should say is that nobody's giving up one in favor of the other. Like, these companies are serious heavyweights that are committed to, market performance and getting their ESG accolades. So it's on the rise. Investors can and will use their money to affect positive change, and I think it's, it's the investing story of our day now.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Great to hear from you this morning.
You too, Rob.
Yeah,
Thank
really
you.
really interesting topic and probably the topic for many years to come, ESG investing. That's it. We're back tomorrow after the 9 o'clock news. Sam LaPrade is back with the Sam LaPrade Show right after the noon news on City News.
The Rob Snow Show.
Weekdays 9 to noon on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Number one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley.
This program is brought to you by Ignite